Thank you for staying with us. It's still Plus TV Africa, and we are live in our election studios. Our first conversation today is about the campaigns and violence. Campaigns are inevitable during elections, especially with campaign rallies, which have a huge crowd. But what has become of concern is violence at these campaign grounds.
Most definitely, and looking at with the recent shooting at the APC campaign in Uyo Rallies session, which involved thugs and fighting during the APC rally in Lagos and the People's Democratic Party presidential rally as well, which also became rowdy and violent when the presidential aspirant left the venue. What can necessarily be done to curtail violence? And joining us to do justice to that, we have Martin Slumber, a political analyst in our studio. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, quickly, Martin, how do we begin to understand this menace of having violence, breakout of violence, cause of people dead or highly injured at campaign rallies, and then see the same thing playing out on election day? Because at the end of the day, some would say the rallies mirror what you see on elections. Let's do a comparison between what we've seen during the campaigns in Lagos and across the country and what you saw on February 23rd and what you expect by the Saturday.
Essentially, I think that what generates violence in our climb will be that the idea of competing, you know, we don't see it as a sport, we don't see it as a game, we don't see it as something that we can outmaneuver by our intellectual ability, our resource endowments, so to say. Some of us are born with IQ that is so high, some so low. It is the reality of life, but some people don't want to accept that. As a result, when rivalry sets in, you discover that there is a tendency to want to, if you like, balance the playing field that is not so level. An attempt is made to take advantage of, if you like, the not, how will I put it now? In fact, let me rephrase. When you go for an agenda, which is not exactly very plausible, you find that you look for extra means to outdo whoever it is that you feel you're competing with. That essentially, I believe, is what generates the violence. So we've seen in this country where a president goes for a campaign, for instance, and he's stoned. They destroy his campaign vehicles, they destroy his billboards. This is a president that you call commander-in-chief. At least we saw that in the last administration in the north. But of course, this time around, we also saw, I want to believe, in Ogun State, you know, where people pelted the president, even though they didn't get him. You know, so essentially, that spirit of give and take, competition, we don't really have it. We need to work on, if you like, our mannerism, our disposition towards competition.
I'm curious, are you trying to say that it is our nature to be violent?
That's not what I'm saying.
So when you're saying that we're not taking it as a sport, or we're not taking it as a competition of sorts, we're going beyond and above, what does that mean in essence? Because I'm trying to understand. Is it the nature of Nigerians not to be great sportsmen because I see we're good in football, we're good in, I mean, and then elections are considered, defeat, exactly. So election is also considered a sport of some sorts.
Let me rephrase a bit again and make it a bit more simplistic. The reason why someone, you know, goes out of his way to be violent is because he feels that, or he has the conviction that you are trying to cheat, or that you have actually cheated. In Nigeria today, you know, we have some kind of structure that makes it more or less necessary to be violent to get something. How do I mean? You cannot really passionately argue your case. You go to court, you argue your case, before you know it, the judge says, you know what, I'm washing my hands off this case. You look at the Bola Ige incident, for instance, and the judge says, you know what, I don't want to continue with this case. Why is that so? And then you look at the structure of the country, you say you have read so hard, you have lit your midnight candle so that you can at least do well in an exam, and suddenly with your 200 score point, you don't make it to the university. Somebody that has 12 marks goes into the university. These are sources of violence. So the system is faulty. Going back to the election scenario, the truth is that if you go to an election place and for some reason they don't make adequate preparation for checking people whether they are coming with dangerous weapons, especially if you go to a place that is not enclosed, chances are somebody may just get a brainwave and he will misbehave, especially if from the podium somebody is saying something that is not very exciting. For instance, you call a name and the name reminds the person in the audience of what happened some years back. He gets angry. And again, don't rule out the fact that these days there are drugs all over the place. So before you know, somebody is already high. And when he gets to that gathering, you say something and you say, you know what, had it been it was my party, I'm sure it wouldn't have been like this. That is on the one hand. Please, just give me a moment. Then again, you know that these days the kind of crowds that we see at election campaigns, they are not crowds that essentially go there because they have the passion to want to listen to what this person has to say or what this party has to say. Most of the people you see trooping to that place, they are aiming to get maybe rice or salt or sugar, or if you like, some stipend to leave the place with. And as a result, we hear of rented crowd. That is what we're seeing. And by the time they gather, and someone had come to this meeting, to this gathering, believing that he will leave the place with 3,000, and they give him maybe 500 naira, an argument will ensue. And of course, again, he was given the impression that maybe after like 2 hours, he would have left the place. But 5 hours, the person they are waiting for has not come. Then he runs out of patience. So you see, our ability to streamline some of these things is at the root cause of the violence that you see.
Systemic failure. This is
yes,
what you're saying.
exactly. Beautiful.
Now, talking about systemic failure, if you recall during the Lagos APC rally in Lagos just a few weeks back, you will understand that while the governorship candidate was giving a speech, I think it was Baba Ambode that was still giving a speech. Yes, the governor was still speaking.
Yes.
And then there was a breakout of violence. There were security personnel there,
yes,
but they were seemingly overwhelmed by the situation. That was the incident that led to MC Oluomo being stabbed.
Yes.
Now again, we look at what happened in Okota,
yes,
and other places across Lagos State. We see the tussle where they are struggling for the ballot papers, those individuals who decide to disrupt the whole situation there. Once again, we saw the security overwhelmed. They were looking helplessly. There were videos there where the thugs would pull the ballot boxes, empty the content. Some he had to gather and then put back. But at the end of the day, he was overwhelmed. Shooting scenarios, they were overwhelmed. So marrying the two situations again, what lessons should we be learning if we've seen that this mirrors what exactly happened in the rally, happened in election, and we are having another election on Saturday? So what should our security be thinking now in ensuring that we don't have another repeat?
I think that essentially we need to agree on what precipitates this kind of violence. It is not just basically systemic failure per se. We should be able to hold certain individuals accountable for some of the roles that they played. How do I mean? Let us look at maybe a football game. Let me use this as an analogy. You go to a fully packed stadium. We're talking thousands, maybe 80,000, maybe 100,000. Now, the FIFA president is there, a powerful man. In fact, the head of the game. But the truth is, the rule says that the referee is in charge. If the referee awards a penalty, the FIFA president cannot do anything about it. And nobody in that stadium can fall out of line. But here, you have a gathering of 10,000 people, even less, 2,000 people, and there's problem everywhere. Why? Because nobody wants to follow the rules. And by the time you look at all of the rules, all of the regulations that preceded this meeting, you find 1,001 instances where people have breached all kinds of constituted authority. And that, for me, is what precipitates the crisis. In your subconscious mind, you have it at the back of the mind that, yes, I remember what this guy did to me last week. And he happens to be an Igbo man, for instance. So now you're standing close to an Igbo man and you don't like the way he's breathing. Perhaps he came in from a very long distance, he had to run to catch up, and you get angry and you're like, my friend, why are you breathing so heavily? Okay, move. And he's like, what's your problem? The same reason you're here is why I'm also here. And before you know, there's crisis. The problem that has just, if you like, resulted is not what happened right there on the field. What precipitated it is the experience he had prior to that meeting, which had to do with somebody else. So in this country, I've always held the argument that with the way our country is structured, incidentally, before I came into the studio, we're talking about how we've lost values in this country. And some of my colleagues were saying, we've lost values because there is no discipline. And I'm like, no, it's not true. The inequalities have been engendered by people who failed to take responsibility. For instance, let me ask you a very simple question. In a situation where you had, say, 3 regions in Nigeria, 2 regions were in southern Nigeria, 1 region was in northern Nigeria. And I dare say that by the time the parliament came into focus, by the time they debated the structure of Nigeria, they actually created a 3rd region within the south. So invariably, what am I saying? We had 3 regions in southern Nigeria, just 1 region in northern Nigeria. Now, how do you explain that southern Nigeria now has the short end of the stick? That is where the problem is. And that is the nature of all of our meetings, where you find a situation where we say, okay, let's assume, for instance, that the 3 regions were states. It simply means that if we were exercising federal character, what you find today will mean that before a northerner will get a place in any federal establishment, 3 southerners must have been sorted out. Do you understand what I'm saying? Today we have a country where 1 region has given us 19 states plus Abuja, whereas 3 regions have given us 17 states. It's a problem. In our subconscious mind, I'm not saying in our reality, in our subconscious mind, it is registered in our hearts for majority of us that this is a fundamental problem and we need to address it.
But that's
so it is the same nature of what we find when there is no fairness, there is no equity, there is no level playing field. Everybody suspects the other person that
but do we have to? Because I think that life is about choices, and the choices you make would either make or mar you.
Okay.
But as much as we all know that we have problems, we have different alliances, should that be an excuse? I mean, there are frustrations also, but should that be an excuse for the violence that we see every other day? Because most of these violences that we see are either perpetrated by people who are being paid to do it, or people who feel that they have been, like you said, to borrow your words, been shown the short end of the stick.
The stick, yeah.
But it still boils down to having a choice. If I have to go by what you said, and you're saying that, we have been poorly treated, certain things have not happened, why resort to violence? Why do we not do the things that we need to do, like going to cast your vote, waiting and watch it get counted, instead of, engaging in violence, if you really want to change?
When you're boxed into a corner, the truth is you cannot break the wall. You must react. Following from what I was saying before now, just for you to understand exactly where I'm coming from. Has it occurred to you, for instance, that all the states as we have them presently were created by military people? All the states, no exception. In fact, all of the local governments were created by military people. And incidentally, it also should surprise you, maybe if you haven't taken time to notice, not just military people, but northern military people. So it is an issue. You see, for life to be fair, there must be a balance of power. The reason why I will not misbehave is because I know that what I'm carrying in my pocket, maybe is an Odeshi, you also have yours. So as a result, I give you respect. Respect becomes mutual when there is a balance of power. But in a situation where you have all of the aces, you have boxed me into a corner. And people say, why don't you take the civil options? Why don't you take the democratic options? Why don't you take, if you like, the spiritual option of praying? We have been told all of that. The people who did these things that plunged us to the crisis that we're in now, did they pray? They did not. So the truth is, for this whole thing to be resolved, is either we talk to ourselves honestly, plain, because truth has power. That power cannot be silenced by the barrel of a gun. That is the power of truth. Truth is so strong that when you tell it to the enemy understands precisely what you're saying and cannot do anything about the judgment that he or she gets right within his own subconscious mind. That is where we are, and we need to take that step. Otherwise, we're just wasting our time and fooling ourselves.
Talking about speaking the language that everyone should and will understand is what the law says, at least beyond all sorts of religion and ideologies, the rule of law still stands. Now, are you impressed by the disposition of the acting IGP when it says, well, all those individuals who were involved in electoral malpractices and misconduct and perpetrating violence, investigations are still ongoing and they are going to be treated and the law will take its due course? We saw what happened at the rallies. We did not hear any follow-up from the arrest or seeming arrests. We did not see any prosecution. February 23rd, we saw breakout of violence. Although we cannot catch them individuals, there are still links and investigation can still yield some good fruits. And we are being told, well, 2 weeks after, you're still supposed to wait. Do you think we would ever still see law taking its course, arrest, prosecution, and then we can have it be a deterrent for others? Because if I could get away with the rally, I got away with February 23rd, I will get away with March 9th.
Certainly. And you see, it just boils down to precisely what I've been saying. The IGP makes a statement, and at the end of the day, it translates to talk is cheap. Because that's just what it is. You just say a thing, but you don't mean it. In fact, from the moment you start expressing the words, part of the people, amongst the people that are in your audience, they know that you're not going to do anything about it. And they can cite so many instances. Sometimes, even the mob, so to say, they hold a culprit and say, you know what, let's not lynch this one. Let's hand over to the police. And before you know it, the person is out. Back on the streets. Why is the system like that?
So trust is also a problem.
No, essentially, get my point. The truth, from my perspective, is that we have not really gotten what you can call leadership by example. For instance, if one says, I'm going to declare my assets, all thanks to our former president, Yaradua. He said it, he did it. But I also know that a few others have also said, but they didn't do anything about it. Which is why in that secrecy, where all of these things are hidden, some people have taken advantage of the Freedom of Information Bill and said, you know what, okay, the president didn't release, but based on this enactment, we would like to have access to this gentleman's, asset declaration form. And nobody has seen. Incidentally, in that same arrangement, one gentleman somewhere is able to see that of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, who is the head of an arm of government. When you do things like this, you tilt the balance in such a way that violence will definitely, I didn't say maybe, it may take a while, but it will definitely resonate. And that is the issue. We must balance power, we must be honest with ourselves, we must tell each other the truth, and we must be fair. Once we do all of these things and we have exemplary leadership who don't just say one thing and do a different thing, you will discover that the law will be effective.
But in the meantime, because of the way this sounds, it sounds like a whole process. It's like we're going to have a constitutional conference or a referendum of sorts to change certain things, But in the meantime, we have how many days? Basically about 2 days,
hours.
To the elections.
Yes.
What do we do in the interim? Because we cannot have the same, yes,
yes,
exactly. And we know that the stakes are higher when it comes to governorship elections. So what do we do in the interim?
Well, I think that essentially enlightenment, all of the talk, at least it will contribute something. One is that a few people will say, you know what, I won't hang around. Once I'm able to vote, I'm going back home. It will help. Again, you find situations where, the candidates themselves, if it's not a do or die, we all know why, for instance, the heat is so intense in some of these places, some of these spots. Rivers, we know why it is hot. Lagos, we know why it is hot. And from my perspective, if I am a man and I'm having a conflict with a child, the truth is, it is not the child's responsibility to guarantee peace. It is the man's responsibility to guarantee peace. So the heat that is in Lagos, the government that is in power is supposed to guarantee peace. And of course, the heat is the way it is because certain things have happened that simply don't make sense. For instance, I was born in Lagos. I'm a Lagosian ordinarily by conventional rules, right? But I don't have any say. I don't have any. Before they remind you that, you're from the United. All of my schooling in Lagos. All of my taxes in Lagos. All right? But these days I'm beginning to look back to the Niger Delta. But when I go there, I get angry. I'm not talking about violence now. I'm just telling you the emotion. I get angry because there is no federal presence. But here in Lagos, sorry, I'm not digressing. I'll still follow. Here in Lagos, you have so much federal presence. And I've asked this question severally. If it takes 5 naira to put up a bridge, and it takes another 5 naira or more to maintain that bridge, for the rest of the existence of that bridge, some other place is not likely to have its own 5 naira to construct a bridge. Am I communicating? Now, what is the problem of Lagos? I'm Ijaw by tribe, but I was born in Lagos. Now, there is a man who speaks Yoruba, but he's not a Lagosian because he has been carved out of Lagos. Now he's all so powerful. You see, I've always maintained that if we hide basic truths, we compound the problem. I may not mention any name, but several of the governors that have ruled Lagos, civilian authority, they are not Lagosians, but they speak Yoruba, they are Yoruba tribe. It is an issue, and we need to address it. Having said that, for March 9, in under 48 hours, I want to believe that those who are men, they have to take responsibility so that the boys who are just coming to contest will feel safe. If you understand my analogy, that is precisely what will help.
Interesting. Well, I'm just wondering, on the path of families, parents, because of course this has to do with family values.
Very true.
Has to do with background and upbringing, societal, pressure. What do we also need to do as human beings, as the electorate, to also, because I saw a video that has been trending since yesterday of young boys in buses, and they claim to have come from a certain state, sent by a certain person, obviously in a bid to rig the elections. These are people's children. They're from homes. They didn't drop from the sky. How do we also, one way or the other, talk to these people?
Very beautiful question.
Because we can't always leave it for security agencies. This how a mother talks to a child, or how society can also help to,
Well, I think that we need to understand how this transition happened. Some time ago, I had this friend who was telling me how it used to be like in his community, which was that you could be passing in your school uniform and there's a mango tree, you could pluck 1 or 2, you eat. The issue will be, if you come with a basket, then it is an offense, it's an infringement. But if you're thirsty and there is a stream, even though it's someone's compound, you can drink. And you could leave your house open, nobody will take anything. The thing with our society now is that the cost of living has gone so high, and we're living some form of artificial reality. I know it's a misnomer, artificial and reality. But you see, we must be honest with ourselves. Life expectancy has greatly reduced because of the destitution that has occurred. How do I mean? If my first salary as a banker, as a clerk, then was about 300 naira, 300 and something way
There's
back
a lot
then.
of money there.
It was a lot of money. I could do some savings, I could take friends out and all of that and all of that. Now, all of that has changed. Now, the livelihood, the quality of life, the welfare of the ordinary citizen has become so marginalized and threatened beyond common sense that so many people are just holding on to small straws that they find. If certain people tell you how they get by every day, you'll be shocked. Now, having identified that, what are we now seeing? We're now seeing that leaders that don't have conscience, they are exploiting these people who are disadvantaged. Why would a politician work, for instance, with a tout ordinarily? I've always asked this question that I still do not understand what role and what benefit touts are contributing to a place like Lagos, for instance, where at every bus stop somebody is collecting some money and yet the roads are bad. You find that I've been asked this question before because I used to have my office somewhere in Apapa. What is the problem with that road at Apapa, for instance? Sorry to digress. And my conclusion is that that place is filthy because nobody is taking care of the filth. Understand what I'm saying? Tankers go there, they stay several days on the road. Those people defecate, those people buy food and throw their wraps on the road. What stops the people that are responsible for cleaning the roads from cleaning? What stops the government from providing a small, if you like, toilet facility that people can use? Convenience. You go there, the whole place is blocked. All the drains are blocked. As simple as that thing is, government cannot do it. But government can hire touts, pay touts. If you know how much these touts earn, you'll be shocked. So essentially, I think that there is a breakdown of our value system. By the politicians, the leaders have poor acumen, sorry to say. The leaders across board, but not everybody entirely. But majority of these leaders lack, I don't know how to put it. I've been in this studio and I said, if you ask yourself, which is why I was saying the last time, I don't know if it was you that was interviewing me, I said, how do you measure value? How do you measure progress? If you think it is about hospitals and roads and what have you, you will be missing it because all of these things will stand there and they have no meaning whatsoever to the quality of life of the individual, which was why I said, how many hospitals did Mandela build? How many hospitals did Martin Luther King build? Yet he has a national holiday. We need to take these things seriously.
Talking about taking things seriously, we cannot dissociate how we have to improve on our security ahead of Saturday. Now, back to back.
Sorry, can I just cut you? I'm really sorry. The security, once the security has taken sides, there is a problem.
No, let me land, then you would understand where I'm heading for.
Okay.
Now, back to back on different occasions, because we're still trying to understand the mirror image you see during the rallies and campaign sessions and what happens on election day. When state or key political actors are arriving, we see a heavier presence of security.
Yes.
And once they leave, security also disappears with them.
Yeah.
We saw that in the election last week, Saturday, when the president and other key actors were coming, whether you call them touts or you call them police officers or you call them just their aides who are supposed to guide them, they were present and security seemed relatively fine. And once they leave, everything fizzles out to normal. Where lies the fate of the masses now? We say we shouldn't have voter apathy. Masses are supposed to come out and vote. We should believe that this is a free, fair, credible election. We should believe that everybody should ensure that they participate in this dispensation. But you are coming out and it's just, you've seen all those videos and just one police officer, there's sporadic shooting, and you think people would come out? How do we marry these two images where we see the very important and the not so important, yet they are the masses who are not so important?
The way I see it, it still comes back to...
Do you think it will play out again on Saturday?
Not necessarily. The passion for... Take Lagos, for instance. An incumbent governor was shown a window. They didn't even show him the door. They showed him a window, which means he left with some inconvenience. You understand? He will have to squeeze himself to fit through that window. That was an issue, or that is an issue. And of course, he has tried his best. The worst part is he was practically humiliated. And the humiliation is compounded by the fact that he's being compelled, more or less, to be on the campaign trail. It doesn't really sit well, if you understand what I mean. Now, the truth is, most of all of these powerful men, or big men to say, they have their bodyguards, maybe our regular security people, maybe their touts, maybe their agberos, so to say. But for the masses, let me tell you my understanding. For everybody, if you put a general rule and you stick with it, chances are nobody will fall in line. You see, most of the times, President of the United States, he goes to the podium, he just walks there quietly on his own. But here, of course, you know, there is an ADC, there is some joker somewhere. It's a problem. Again, if the rain selects where it will fall, by that I mean, we're here, the rain is drenching me, it's not touching you, then it's touching you in this same studio. It's a problem, which is why, as a standard, a general rule is that there is a principle that must apply to all entities.
The police has said that, well, they've taken back all of the
VIP security.
Yes, VIP security.
Yes.
But we still see that
it is always the case. It is always the case, because they themselves don't believe in that arrangement. Do you understand? As I'm here now, maybe when I'm going back, maybe it's late, I didn't drive a car, what have you, who knows? For instance, in certain climes, they identify you as, you're outspoken, and all of that and all of that. The only thing that protects some of us is the truth that we churn out. Having said that, again, you must know that because these people don't believe in the system, they recognize the fact that the system is faulty, which is why they need to be protected. Any system that is secure, for instance, many people don't realize that the way we are created, I've always said that God does not follow anybody anywhere. God just decided that, you know what, I'm going to put something that will reside in every individual, so that if I need an answer, that thing residing in you will vomit all that has happened.
All right.
Are you with me? So we need to establish certain minimum standards and regulations for everybody across board.
Interesting conversation. It looks less tactical than we thought it would be for security and, of course, handling violence. Thank you very much, Mr. Martins Lumba, for speaking with us. He's a political analyst. Well, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be looking at other matters. Of course, the elections is just 48 hours from today, and we're going to be talking more about it. Stay with us.